You can't be serious, I said, though I already knew he was. Justin didn't flinch. He stood in the doorway of the sunroom like a bank manager delivering foreclosure news. Mom, this house is too big for you now. It just makes sense. We'll take care of it. You can stay with Shelley until we figure something out. My legs didn't move. My heart did. A slow, cold drop into silence. I wasn't being asked. I was being dismissed. The house was mine. But I was being evicted. They'd been living with me for 4 years. Just until we get back on our feet, he'd said after losing his job in Phoenix. Rachel, his wife, nodded quietly behind him back then, holding baby Nora. I'd opened my arms and my doors. I emptied 2 guest rooms, moved my things into the small back office so the kids could have space. I cooked, I cleaned, I paid the bills. That was 4 years ago. Now Rachel had a booming photography business. Justin had started working in real estate, and the transition period had turned into full occupation. They repainted the kitchen in their colors, changed the curtains, brought in their furniture. At some point, my grandmother's piano vanished. Justin said it had been donated to make space. And now I was the space to be made. I've always said you could live here as long as you needed, I said quietly. You did, and we're grateful. But it's different now. We've got the kids, and you're not getting any younger. You'll be more comfortable with Shelley. Shelley, my daughter, who lived in a 2-bedroom condo with 3 cats and a high-stress job. She'd offered before, yes, when Rachel and Justin first moved in. But that was for emergencies, not banishment. I sat down slowly on the arm of the sofa. Rachel walked by me without eye contact, holding a laundry basket. Their 2 kids were screaming upstairs. Somewhere in the hallway, the dog barked. This used to be my house, my quiet, my space. Justin kept talking. Something about logistics, but I wasn't listening. I looked at the wall behind him, photos from their vacation last summer, framed, professionally printed. None of me. 4 years ago, I welcomed them with open arms. Today, they were closing the door on me. The sunroom suddenly felt cold. The late afternoon light cast long shadows on the tile floor. Justin was still talking, softer now, trying to sound reasonable, like this was a natural stage of life. But the deed, I said, finally cutting in, it's in my name. That stopped him. He blinked. I know, he said slowly. But come on, Mom. Do you really want to play it that way? I didn't answer. I stood up and walked past him, steady on my feet, and closed the door to my tiny back room, the one they'd let me keep. For now. The back room didn't have a lock, so I wedged an old shoe against the door that night. Not for security, just to feel like I had a line they couldn't cross. My bed creaked when I sat down. The mattress was thin and lumpy, meant for short visits from cousins or grandkids, not for an old woman with sore hips and a lifetime of memories. I looked around at the beige walls, the single lamp, the sad little dresser with a chipped corner. The room felt more like a storage unit than a bedroom. They used to call it the office. Now it was Grandma's space, though no one ever said it kindly. Dinner that night was chicken stir-fry. I'd made it, like always. Justin came home late from a showing and helped himself without a word. Rachel had a client call in the living room. The kids were at the counter watching cartoons on tablets. No one said thank you. No one looked at me. After I cleaned the dishes, I went back to my room. They didn't notice. Some nights I watched TV with them, tried to join in on a show. But their world had built a rhythm I no longer matched. If I laughed too loud, Rachel would glance over with that smile that wasn't a smile. If I asked questions, Justin would sigh, barely hiding his irritation. So I stopped watching. I stopped asking. I was a ghost in my own home. The kitchen was full of things I didn't recognize: organic peanut butter, gluten-free cereal, a fancy espresso machine that took up half the counter. The pantry used to be stocked with my staples: tuna cans, rice, creamed corn, shortbread cookies. Now those things lived on a single shelf behind the dog food. I tried to bake cookies for the kids last week. Nora said they were too chewy, and her brother spit his out. Rachel said maybe I should take a break from baking. The kids' tastes are changing. But it wasn't just the kitchen. They turned my garden into a play space. Swings, sandbox, some kind of inflatable thing with water jets. My tulips were gone. The little bench George built. Gone. They even threw away the wind chime I'd hung the year he died. Justin said it kept hitting the window. I didn't argue. Not then. The last room that still felt like mine was the laundry room, but even that was now filled with color-coded bins labeled with their names. I did their laundry anyway. It gave me something to do, and it kept the peace. Peace. What a lie. Rachel's voice carried from the hallway. She was telling someone on the phone that they were finally going to have the house to themselves soon. "We'll repaint the back room, maybe turn it into a little office for me," she said. The back room? My room. I turned off the lamp and lay in the dark. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to grow old in my home, surrounded by family who visited, not colonized. I didn't expect them to worship me, but I expected to be seen, respected, at the very least allowed to stay. That night, I slept in socks and a sweater. Something inside had gone cold, and I didn't know yet how to warm it up. But I knew one thing for sure. This was not how my story would end. They gave me a lamp with no bulb. That's what I remember most from the day they settled me into the back room. Not the awkward apologies, not the quiet sighs of inconvenience, but the way Justin set down that old brass lamp on the corner table, proud of himself, like he'd done something noble. No bulb, just a hollow socket and dust. I didn't say anything at the time. I never did. When you've been pushed out of your own space inch by inch, you learn that protests only speed up the exile. So I unpacked my 2 boxes, a few sweaters, a framed photo of George and me, my pill organizer, a book I never finished, and placed them quietly on the narrow shelves. There was no closet, just a coat hook behind the door. No mirror either. I had to brush my hair in the reflection of the microwave door. They didn't see the indignity in it. Or maybe they did, and just assumed I wouldn't mind. The kids called it Grandma's Nook. Like I was a cat. Like I was lucky to have a corner at all. At breakfast, I'd hear them whispering, trying to be kind, I suppose, about how to help Grandma transition to Shelley's. Justin mentioned a moving date. Rachel said she'd start boxing up my things after the weekend. Boxing up what? 2 drawers and a chair? I stood in that room one morning, holding the only coat I'd managed to keep from being moved to the attic, and thought, is this what it means to become invisible? You vanish slowly, not all at once. You don't wake up erased. You fade, drawer by drawer, chair by chair. One day, I woke up to find Rachel in my room, measuring the walls. "For shelves," she said, "when it becomes an office." I looked at her. She looked past me. "I'm still living here," I said quietly. She blinked, surprised I'd spoken. "Oh, yes, of course. I mean, eventually. Just planning ahead?" She left without further comment. That night, I opened the drawer under my bed. It barely slid open. Inside were my checkbooks, some old greeting cards, and the property file George and I kept from the day we bought the land. The deed was there. His will. My name, written in thick black letters. Sole owner. We built this house from nothing. George poured the concrete for the back steps himself. I painted every baseboard. We didn't take fancy vacations, but we saved. Saved for this place. For this space. And now they were converting it into a photo shoot backdrop and a remote office. When Nora knocked on my door later, asking for more Wi-Fi because her iPad was being slow, I said no. It was a tiny thing, barely a whisper of defiance, but it felt enormous. I wasn't a guest here. I wasn't a roommate. I was the owner. The next morning, I woke early, earlier than usual. I made coffee in the quiet, before Rachel's blender started screaming. I sat at the kitchen table and looked out at the backyard, the one with the inflatable monstrosity instead of my lilacs. I thought about George, about the promise of growing old here together, about how he always said, "If you don't defend your space, someone else will take it." I used to laugh at that. Now I understood. Rachel came in, surprised to see me awake. "You're up early," she said. I looked at her calmly, took a sip of coffee, and replied, "Just thinking about what belongs to me." I remember the first morning George and I stepped onto this land, just dirt and rock. No foundation yet, no fence. I had an old notebook in my hand, one where I'd drawn rectangles and circles, and scribbled things like, "Pantry here?" or "Big window in kitchen." George brought a thermos of coffee and blueprints rolled under his arm. He always liked things official. I liked things to feel right. We were both 42, married 18 years, 2 kids still young enough to crawl into our bed on weekends, and we were about to build a home from scratch. Not just a house, a home. There's a difference. He wanted a wide porch, big enough for a swing. I wanted built-in shelves for my recipe books. He insisted on 3 bathrooms. "I don't want to wait in line when I'm 80, he joked. I wanted a quiet sunroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. We gave each other all of it. And we worked for it. God, we worked. George ran a small construction business. Nothing fancy, but he was reliable, fair, honest. His clients stuck with him for decades. I was a school secretary by day and a bookkeeper by night, always keeping the numbers tight. We didn't buy things on credit. We saved for everything. Sometimes painfully slow, but it meant the roof over our heads came with peace of mind. I still remember signing the final papers at the title office. The man behind the desk said, "Now whose name should we put this under?" George didn't even blink. "Hers," he said, pointing at me. "I trust her more than I trust the government." He meant it. Always said if anything happened to him, the kids and I would be secure. He joked that I'd outlive him by a decade just to spite his bad cholesterol. He was off by a year. He died 11 years ago. Heart failure. Quiet. Sudden. A man who could lift bricks all day fell over at the kitchen sink while washing an apple. I was 67, and I kept the house going. Fixed the roof after a storm, had the boiler replaced, paid off the last tax assessment when the city added sidewalks. I even kept George's roses alive, barely. So when Justin said, "This house is ours now," what he really meant was, "We took it because you let us." And maybe that was true. I'd let them stay. I'd said yes to their tears, their stories of hard times, their promises of just a few months. I'd said yes when Rachel asked if her studio equipment could go in the den. Yes when they said they'd repaint the guest bath. Yes when the baby needed the bigger room. Yes, when Justin brought home a second dog. I said yes to stay loved. Because some part of me, the foolish part that doesn't age even when your bones do, thought if I made their life easier, I'd be needed. But now they didn't need me. Not as a helper, not as a grandmother, not even as an old woman with her name on the deed. They needed me gone. The evening after Rachel measured the walls in my room, I walked barefoot across the living room and just stood there. No one noticed. The TV was on. The kids were shouting. Rachel was scrolling on her phone. Justin had his laptop open. My lamp, the one from George's old reading corner, now sat behind Rachel's editing setup. I don't know what came over me, but I said, "Do any of you know what year this house was built?" No one looked up, so I said it louder. 1987, April. Rachel blinked at me. "Cool, Mom." I nodded. I just thought someone should remember. Then I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, my fingers tracing the frame of the photo of George and me, the one that used to hang in the hallway before they replaced it with a beach print from Target. I didn't cry. Not that night. I'd done enough crying in silence over the last year, over forgotten birthdays, over skipped Mother's Days, over being told to knock before entering my own kitchen because Rachel's in the middle of a shoot. No, I didn't cry. I planned. The next morning, I pulled the property folder from the drawer again. I reread the deed, the mortgage releases, the notarized letters. It was all still mine. All of it. I hadn't just signed on the dotted line all those years ago. I'd earned every nail in this place, and no one, not even my son, was going to decide when I left. Not anymore. The office that notarized our house deed was long gone, replaced by a bakery that sold overpriced gluten-free cupcakes. But the paper they gave me that day, the original deed, still sat in a plastic sleeve in my bedroom drawer. Yellowed a little now. Smelled faintly of printer ink and lemon-scented drawer liners. Owner of record? June Carroll. Sole owner? No et al. No Carroll Family Trust. Just me. That was always the arrangement. George was the builder, the planner, the one who climbed on roofs and sketched floor plans on napkins. But the house? That was my name, my risk, my savings, my signature. I was the one who paid the taxes every year, even when the mailbox was full of medical bills. I was the one who refinanced it twice to get us through the lean years. And I was the one who held it all together when George's heart failed on a Tuesday afternoon. After he died, the lawyer said, "You're in good shape, June. You own it free and clear." I'd nodded politely then. What else could I do? Back then, I didn't feel like I owned anything, just rooms with shadows in them. But now that house was full again, and not with memories. With noise. With Rachel's staging equipment, ring lights, sample backdrops in pinks and beiges. With Justin's real estate clients coming over on weekends to admire our place, as he called it. With kids who couldn't be bothered to say good morning, and a dog who liked to chew on the legs of my dining chairs. Mine. They'd started hosting dinners, with their friends, in my dining room. I'd be told after the fact, usually by the stack of dirty dishes left in the sink, or the smell of wine and chili clinging to the air. Sometimes I was invited. Most times I wasn't. "Too loud for you, Mom," Rachel would say sweetly. "Why don't you relax in your room?" As if my place in the house had been demoted to a utility closet. I sat at the kitchen table one morning and watched Rachel dig through my spice drawer, which now mostly held imported jars with designer labels and spices I couldn't pronounce. "Where's the paprika?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Probably tossed it. We haven't used it in years." "We?" I found it later. Behind the fancy sea salts, the turmeric in glass, the black truffle flakes. My tin, with the faded red label and dented corner, pushed to the very back like a relic. Like me. That afternoon, I went online and looked up the county property records. My name was still there. Not Justin's, not Rachel's. Mine. No liens, no joint ownership, no paperwork filed to contest it. Good, I thought. And then I did something I hadn't done in a while. I made a list. I pulled out the old yellow notepad I kept for grocery plans and wrote in big letters, "Who lives here vs. who owns it." Then I listed every name: Justin, Rachel, Nora, Mason, and me. Only one name was backed by a legal document. I stared at the page for a long time. Then I started a second list. Things they changed without asking. The curtains in the dining room. My garden, gone. George's chair, too worn. Donated without a word. Photos removed from the hallway. My teapot replaced by an electric kettle. The lock on the front door changed for security. The list was longer than I expected. I stared at it until the light outside began to shift. The house was quiet for a rare moment. I could hear the tick of the wall clock, the one Justin said didn't fit their aesthetic. I refused to take it down. George bought that clock for our 25th anniversary. My eyes drifted to the pantry door, where I'd once measured Justin's height in pencil marks year by year. Those marks were still there, under a thin coat of eggshell paint. They hadn't bothered to sand it properly, just covered it up. Like me. I folded the paper list and slid it into the deed folder. Then I picked up the phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in almost a decade. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Carroll," came the voice on the other end, crisp and familiar. "How can I help you today?" I took a breath and said, "I think I need to revisit some documents. Property ownership, power of attorney, access rights. I want everything reviewed." There was a pause, then a click of a keyboard. "Of course," the voice said. "We'll set up a meeting." I never meant to become their maid. That wasn't the arrangement. At least not in words. But when you live in your own home and everyone treats you like you're part of the furniture, soft, silent, expected, it happens before you realize it. At first, I wanted to help. Truly. That's what you do when your son loses his job and his wife is still nursing and they've got no place else to go. You pick up groceries, you babysit, you run a load of laundry or two. And then one day, you realize you haven't sat down to a warm meal in 3 weeks because you're always the last one eating, always standing by the sink while everyone else talks over their plates. I started waking up early. Not because I wanted to, but because if I didn't, the dishwasher would be loaded wrong, the baby's formula would be made with cold water, and the dog would track mud through the kitchen before anyone let him out. I took care of all of it. Quietly. Without being asked. Justin noticed just enough to feel fine ignoring it. Rachel noticed enough to expect it. At some point, I became the person who remembered to refill the toilet paper, who sorted out school papers, who put clean towels in their bathrooms. Not once did anyone say, "Thank you." But if I forgot something, if there was no milk or the towels were still damp, "Mom, you okay?" Justin would say with a frown. "You've been a little off lately." Off. I kept a little notebook tucked in the kitchen drawer. It had started as a grocery list, but then it became a log. Not out of spite, not even out of bitterness. Just a way to stay sane. I recorded things. 3 hours babysitting while Rachel went to a shoot. $47 spent on just a few things they Venmo'd later. Never did. 4 loads of laundry in one day. Once, I added up the grocery receipts I'd saved in a basket under the sink. I'd spent over $2,000 in the last 3 months. Not on anything for myself. When I mentioned it, gently, almost apologetically, Justin waved it off. "We'll cover the next few," he said. "Things are just tight right now." Things were always tight for them, except when they weren't. There were weekend brunches with friends, new patio furniture that appeared out of nowhere, a spa gift card for Rachel's birthday. My own birthday came and went without a card. I didn't say anything. I cleaned the kitchen. There were moments, small ones, that stung more than they should have. Rachel asking me not to wear certain sweaters around her clients. Justin suggesting I stay in my room during Nora's birthday party because the kids get overwhelmed. They were always polite, but never kind. One afternoon, I overheard Rachel telling her sister on the phone, "Honestly, it's like having free childcare and housekeeping. She's just here, like part of the structure." Part of the structure. That night, I stood in the pantry. The door cracked slightly, the scent of stale cereal and forgotten tea bags hanging in the air, and let myself cry. Not loud, not ugly. Just silent tears that soaked the collar of my nightgown. I cried because I'd traded my independence for the illusion of family, because I wanted to feel useful, and now I felt used. Because the house that once echoed with laughter and smelled like cinnamon and coffee now buzzed with Wi-Fi and transactions and the low-level hum of people too busy to remember I existed. And maybe worst of all, because I let it happen. I'd allowed them to reshape my role into something convenient. They didn't see me as a mother anymore, or even a woman. I was a service, a function. But I wasn't going to be anymore. That evening, I took my little notebook from the drawer, flipped to a clean page, and wrote at the top in capital letters, "Last straw." The last straw wasn't some grand betrayal. It was my birthday, 78 years old. I wasn't expecting balloons or parties, not anymore. But a phone call, a card, a slice of cake after dinner. Something. That morning, I baked my own lemon pound cake. I even set it on the counter with plates and forks, like a hint for them to notice. I told myself they were probably planning a surprise later. Maybe the kids would sing. Maybe Justin would come in from work with flowers. The day passed quietly. Rachel was on her laptop in the living room, editing photos. The kids were at school. Justin came home around 5, kissed Rachel on the cheek, opened the fridge, and poured himself a drink. Nobody said a word. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, waiting. The cake sat untouched. Justin and Rachel ate leftover takeout in front of the TV. When the kids came home, they rushed upstairs to play video games. No one even glanced at the cake. By 9 o'clock, I put it back in the fridge. That was when something inside me shifted. Not snapped, just shifted, like a stone that's been holding too much weight for too long and finally rolls aside. I went into my little room and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photo of George on the nightstand. His eyes crinkled at the corners, even in pictures. He'd always known how to say the hard thing. "Don't let people take you for granted, June." He said it when Justin was a teenager. He said it when Rachel first came into the picture. He even said it when he handed me the deed to sign. "You're the anchor," he told me. "But an anchor doesn't have to sink." I took the property folder from the drawer and opened it again, not for comfort, but for clarity. Deed, tax records, insurance, paid in full, no liens, my name alone. Then I opened the little notebook I'd started logging chores and expenses in. I turned to the page I'd labeled Last Straw. Below it, I wrote in steady block letters. No one remembered my birthday? Not even Justin? Not even a text? I stared at it until the ink began to blur. Then, on the next line, I'm done. It felt like a declaration, not a complaint. I thought about all the years of just helping out, all the times I'd reached into my savings for them, all the little humiliations that came with being invisible in my own home. The lamp with no bulb, the pantry with my spices pushed to the back, my garden trampled for a bounce house, the dog chewing George's chair. I closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer with the deed. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I took out a real pen and a piece of heavy paper from an old stationery box and wrote down 3 names. Property, attorney, financial advisor, locksmith underneath. I wrote 1 sentence. Make appointments. When I was done, I stood up, went back to the kitchen, and cut myself a slice of the cake. It was dry at the edges, but still sweet. I ate it slowly at the table with the lights off, the only sound the tick of George's clock on the wall. They still didn't notice. It was almost funny. My first act of defiance was simply claiming a piece of my own cake, and as I chewed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A flicker of anticipation, like the first cool wind before a storm. The next chapter of my life wasn't going to be quiet. Not anymore. I waited until they all left the house. Rachel had a shoot that morning, something with a newborn and a pastel blanket. Justin had back-to-back showings across town. The kids were at school. The house was finally still. I made a fresh pot of coffee, poured a cup, and sat at the dining table with the folder and my notebook. The silence felt heavier than usual, but not in a bad way. It was the kind of silence that lets you think clearly, without interruption or performance. From the drawer under the phone, I took out the rest of my saved paperwork. Receipts, old statements, check stubs, donation slips, invoices. I'd kept everything. It wasn't that I'd planned to someday prove a point. I just couldn't bring myself to throw it all away. Now, I was grateful for the instinct. I spread them out across the table in piles: grocery bills, school fees, vet appointments, car repairs. Rachel's new camera lens, paid for with my card. Justin's online course fees when he decided to reinvent himself. Even a receipt for matching family Christmas pajamas, size S to XL. None in my size. I found a check stub from last year, $9,800 to Bright Future Academy. That was Mason's private kindergarten. I remembered Rachel's soft-voiced plea over dinner. "June, it's just such a good school, but the deposit's due Friday. We'll pay you back in the fall." They never did. They never even mentioned it again. I started writing numbers in the margins of a pad, adding them roughly. I wasn't interested in perfect accuracy, just an idea. The total passed $30,000 in less than 15 minutes, not including groceries, not including utilities. Utilities. I pulled up my online bank account on my tablet and logged in. My name, again, at the top of the screen. Electric, gas, water, Wi-Fi, all on autopay, all under my name, and all rising every month. And that's when I saw it, the most recent payment to Crestview Home Security System. Justin had installed it 3 months ago after a weird guy knocked on the door while Rachel was home alone. He said it would protect the whole family. He never told me the system required a monthly subscription, and he'd listed himself as the primary account contact. He made my house more secure by locking me out of control. I wrote that down, too. Next, I opened the file marked Legal. Inside were my old documents: the living will, the property deed, The power of attorney George and I had drafted after his first chest scare. I reread it carefully. Justin was listed as the secondary power of attorney, only in case of my mental or physical incapacitation. I was still fully in control. No one could sell, rent, refinance, or reassign anything without my permission, and I was still very much in possession of my faculties, more than they realized. A knock at the door made me jump. I shuffled the papers quickly and tucked them under a napkin, but it was just the mailman, polite as ever, holding a padded envelope addressed to me. Inside were the new copies I'd requested from the county records office. Deed, plat map, tax history. It was all so simple in black and white. This house was mine, legally, fully, completely. No matter how many baby swings they installed, no matter how many rugs they covered the floors with, no matter how many walls they painted warm white and sandstone mist. The blood of this house, the mortgage payments, the sweat and scrubbing, the holidays without gifts because we were saving for the next water heater, all of it flowed through my name. And now, they were trying to crowd me out with Target furniture and passive-aggressive smiles. But I wasn't just keeping records anymore. I was making plans. I called the attorney that afternoon. Her assistant answered, chipper and young. "Hi there, how can we help today?" "My name is June Carroll," I said. "I need to review some estate documents, and I'd like to revoke access previously granted to my son." There was a short pause, then typing. "Of course, Ms. Carroll, we can schedule you for Thursday morning. Do you prefer in-office or a home visit?" "In-office," I said, without hesitation. "I'll come in." Next, I called the financial advisor George, and I had worked with back in the day. He'd retired, but his daughter had taken over the firm. She remembered me. "June, oh my gosh, it's been years. What can I help you with?" "I need to move some things around," I said calmly. "And I want to know what I can do to protect my assets from people I once trusted." That got her attention. "I'll clear my calendar for you," she said. I ended the calls, stacked the papers into 2 neat piles, and placed them back into the folder. I wiped down the table like I always did. Only this time, I wasn't cleaning up after someone else. I was making space for what came next. The front door opened around 5. Laughter. Backpacks. Rachel's high heels clacking across the floor. "Mom?" she called from the kitchen. "Did you eat? I can warm up something." I smiled to myself. "I'm good," I called back. "Just had a long day, doing paperwork." There was a pause. Then, "Okay." But I was already back in my room, door gently closed, folder resting on my lap. I stared at the label on the front. Carroll Residence. Owner's documents. And for the first time in months, the word owner felt real again. The attorney's office hadn't changed much in a decade. Same scuffed linoleum floor, same dusty ficus in the corner, same clock that ticked just a little too loudly. The receptionist was new, young, distracted, tapping her acrylic nails against a plastic keyboard. But the voice behind the door was as familiar as my own. "June Carroll?" said Ms. Travers as she stood and offered her hand. "I was wondering when I'd see you again." I smiled and took her hand, grateful for how firm her grip still was. She'd been our lawyer since George and I first sat in this office 37 years ago to draft our will and sign the deed. She'd walked us through taxes, insurance, even a minor dispute with a neighbor over a fence. But today was different. Today, I wasn't here to ask questions. I was here to take back control. We sat across from each other at the long oak desk. I placed the folder in front of me and opened it with the kind of care people usually reserve for family photo albums. "I want to revoke Justin's secondary power of attorney," I said calmly. and I want to make sure all property rights are clarified, re-verified, and protected. No co-ownership, no access without my written consent. Ms. Travers leaned back slightly, assessing me not as an old woman or a grieving widow, but as a client. That's what I needed. That can be done, she said. Do you feel he's planning to act without your consent? He's been acting as if he already owns the place, I replied, voice even. I just want to be clear, in writing, that he doesn't. She nodded, opened a file on her screen, and began typing. Do you want to assign a new secondary? Yes, I said. My granddaughter. Her name is Tessa. She's the only one who checks on me without asking for anything. Ms. Travers looked up. That says a lot. I didn't reply. We both knew what it said. Over the next 40 minutes, we went through every document: will, deed, POA, medical directives, access rights to bank accounts, even house-related utilities. She drafted new forms, printing them with sharp efficiency, each page crisp and clean, ready for my initials. When we got to the house deed, she paused. You know, this was one of the first properties I ever recorded under a single name. Most couples put both, but George, she smiled. He trusted you. I felt my throat tighten. He did. And now, she said gently, you're just making sure no one else takes that trust for granted. I nodded. We signed everything. She notarized each page with a stamp that made a satisfying thump against the desk. When we were done, she slid 2 folders toward me, one labeled Executed Documents and the other Client Copies. I'll keep the originals on file, she said, but these are yours. Keep them somewhere safe. If you ever need them, for any reason, you just call me. I thanked her, gathered the folders, and stood. There was no rush in my steps as I left the office. No dramatics, just a sense of forward motion, one that I hadn't felt in years. Not since George. My next stop was the financial advisor's office. Claire met me at the door, arms wide, as if I were family. George and I had watched her grow up, shadowing her father through tax season. Now she ran the place. She poured me tea, offered cookies I didn't touch, and listened carefully as I laid out everything: the expenses, the quiet theft of autonomy, the birthday that never came. You've got more than enough, she said, scrolling through my accounts. You could buy another house tomorrow. I don't want another house, I said. I just want mine back. She grinned. Together we created a new system. Separate trust accounts, restricted access, daily alerts for transactions. Justin's name was removed from everything. No more emergency authorizations, no more auto payments on his behalf. All utilities and services were now routed through a new management app, one I controlled. Want me to freeze the cards he has access to? Claire asked. I hesitated. Just a second. Yes. She clicked once. Done. I didn't feel guilt. I felt quiet, like the silence after a heavy rain. Before I left, Claire handed me a clean folder. I added it to the others in my purse. Outside, the wind had picked up. Fall was coming. The air smelled sharper than it had the week before. I took a deep breath, then reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and scrolled to the locksmith's number. He answered on the second ring. Hi, I said. I need the locks changed, all of them. They hosted a dinner party that night. A client mixer, Rachel called it. Some networking thing for her photography business. I wasn't invited. Not officially. Not even casually. That morning, she had breezed through the kitchen in heels and a silky robe, brushing past me with her phone in one hand and a mug in the other. Try not to cook tonight, June, okay? We'll need the kitchen clear for setup. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even said with malice. Just a statement, like I was the housekeeper, and this was a scheduling conflict. So I nodded and left the kitchen without a word. I watched them work all afternoon. Rachel cleared off the dining table and laid out champagne glasses and bite-sized hors d'oeuvres. Justin vacuumed, rearranged furniture, lit candles. Nora and Mason were told to stay upstairs, but they peeked down anyway. I heard laughter, clinking glasses, and the low thrum of some curated playlist Rachel had chosen to make the house feel warm, modern, aspirational. Not homey, just on brand. I stayed in my room, door cracked slightly, lights off. It was strange watching your house being transformed into a showroom while you sit quietly in the back, like a forgotten coat hanging on a rack. Around 7 p.m., the doorbell started ringing. One by one, people filed in. Women in long cardigans and wide hats, men with tight smiles and blazers too snug at the elbow. They complimented the lighting, the wallpaper, the layout. Rachel beamed and thanked them as if she'd designed the house herself. I heard her say, "We've been here for years. It's our forever place." No mention of me. Of course not. Not when I was tucked in the back like an afterthought. By 8 p.m., I'd had enough. I stood, walked over to the closet, and took out the folder from the law office. I opened it one last time and skimmed the pages. The deed, the updated power of attorney, the financial authorizations, the notarized statement declaring me the sole owner and primary authority of the property. My fingers rested on the envelope from the locksmith, still sealed. I hadn't opened it yet. The keys were inside. I would open it soon. Just not yet. Not tonight. I wanted to see how far they were willing to take this performance. At 8:30 p.m., I crept down the hallway, careful not to draw attention. I stood at the end of the corridor, just beyond the sight line of the living room, and watched. Rachel was standing by the fireplace, laughing with 2 men in collared shirts. Justin was by the drinks table, explaining something about property value. My antique china set had been pulled out and laid on a tray, the one I kept for special occasions, the one they'd mocked me for keeping. A woman wandered near the hallway. She glanced at me, startled. "Oh," she said. "Sorry. Didn't know anyone was back here." "I live here," I said calmly. Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh, I thought this was Rachel's mother-in-law's place." "It is," I said. "I'm her mother-in-law." She blushed and mumbled something about "nice to meet you," then turned and disappeared back into the party. It wasn't anger that swelled in my chest. It was something colder, more focused. This wasn't a family home to them. It was a stage, and I was the curtain they kept trying to pull shut. I went back to my room, locked the door, still using the old shoe wedge out of habit, and sat on the edge of the bed. I opened the locksmith envelope, took out the new keys, and held them in my hand. They were heavy, cold, smooth, each one cut just for me. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the dishwasher hummed in the kitchen, I stepped out with the keys in my pocket. Justin and Rachel were laughing quietly in the living room, sipping wine. They didn't notice me at first. Then Rachel looked up. "Oh, hey, Mom, did the noise keep you up?" "No," I said. Justin turned. "We cleaned up, don't worry." I nodded. "I'm not worried," I said, "but I will need everyone out of the house by the end of next week." Silence. Rachel blinked. "Wait, what?" "This is my home," I said, "and I've decided it's time to have it back." They both stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I don't understand, Justin said slowly. You don't need to, I replied. You just need to pack. At first, they laughed. Justin actually chuckled like I'd made a joke he didn't quite get. Rachel gave one of those nervous smiles people give to the elderly when they misplace a word or forget what day it is. Mom, Justin said gently, like he was speaking to a child, I think you're overtired. Why don't we talk about this tomorrow? I held up the envelope. Here are the new keys. I had the locks changed this morning. The locksmith installed deadbolts. You still have 5 days. The room went still. You what? Rachel's voice cracked like glass. I took a slow breath, willing my hands not to shake. You heard me. This house is mine. Legally. Fully. I've revoked every form of shared access. Financial, legal, domestic. The bank accounts you've been using? Frozen. The auto payments? Canceled. The utilities? Rerouted to my name only. You'll receive nothing in your names after this week. Justin's face turned a color I hadn't seen in him since he was 5 and caught stealing from the cookie jar. Confusion, disbelief, shame, and, finally, anger. You can't just do that, he said. We live here. No, I said, my voice low and steady. You stayed here for 4 years. You squatted in my home, treated me like a guest in my own kitchen, made financial decisions using my accounts, used my name, my history, and my silence. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. And I let you. I let it happen. But not anymore. Rachel stepped forward, her voice rising. We have children, June. You want to put your own grandkids out on the street. I looked at her. I'd prefer not to. But I've spent the last 4 years living like a stranger in my own home while you built a life on top of mine. That ends now. But where would we go? She asked, genuinely distressed. We'd have to move the kids out of school. There's plenty of time, I said. 5 days, maybe even 6, if you're respectful. But that's the best I can offer. Justin's hands were clenched. I could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. This is insane, he said. You're throwing away your own family. No, I replied. I'm reclaiming myself. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like it might somehow sound more reasonable. Mom, come on. We can figure this out. We can have you stay in the guest room again, maybe make a schedule. No. I walked to the side table by the front door and set the keys down. 1 for the front, 1 for the back, 1 for the shed. I'm not scheduling my existence around people who treat me like a liability. Rachel was crying now. Real tears are close enough to pass. I felt the tug in my chest. The same pull I'd felt so many times before. That temptation to step back, to soothe, to make it easier for everyone. But I didn't. I turned to walk down the hall. My room was still small, still quiet, but different now. It was mine, and I had the documents to prove it. Behind me, I heard Justin's voice, lower, angrier. We'll see about this, he said. You will, I called back, in writing. And then I closed my door, locked it with the new key, and exhaled. The first thing I did the next morning was disable the Wi-Fi, not out of spite, just logistics. The account was in my name, the bill paid from my account, the one they'd used without asking for over a year. I logged in, unchecked the auto-renew, and submitted a termination request, effective immediately. I stood by the kitchen counter sipping tea while the house slowly came undone. By 9 a.m., Rachel's voice echoed through the hallway. Why isn't the internet working? She shouted from the living room. A moment later, Justin appeared in the kitchen, holding his laptop, like it was a broken limb. "Mom," he said, tone clipped. "Did the Wi-Fi go out?" "No," I said, placing my mug in the sink. "I turned it off. You'll need to get your own service." He blinked. "You're serious?" I met his eyes. "I'm just getting started." An hour later, I canceled the car insurance policy I'd extended to cover their SUV when they couldn't get approved on their own. That same afternoon, I contacted the alarm company and removed Justin as the primary contact. They called to confirm the new passcode. I gave them George's old chess score, E4C5. I liked the poetry in that. Opening move. Sicilian defense. That evening, I unplugged the garage door opener from the system app on my tablet. Rachel knocked on my door 10 minutes later, breathless. "Can you open the garage? I'm late for a client." "You can open it manually," I said, not unkindly. "There's a latch. Or you could take an Uber." Her eyes narrowed. "This is petty. This is mine." Every time I said it, it tasted stronger. Not sweet, not smug, just clean, like cool water after a long day of dust in your mouth. They were disoriented, like people waking from a dream where they were royalty. I watched it happen in slow motion. The way Justin started speaking quieter, the way Rachel checked her tone, the way the kids, sweet kids, still innocent, asked if I'd come read to them that night, and for once they looked like they meant it. I said yes. Not for them. For me. By Wednesday, the house had shifted. They tiptoed now, whispered, packed quietly during the day. I didn't ask where they were going. They didn't offer. I heard the rustle of boxes, the drag of duct tape. Rachel's voice on the phone, curt and clipped. Justin's sighs. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm, like something long submerged had finally risen to the surface and taken a full breath. I did my own laundry. I baked muffins for myself. I watched an old black and white movie with the volume low and the door open. They didn't interrupt. On Thursday, a courier came with a package addressed to the Carroll family. I signed for it, then crossed out the name and wrote, "Return to sender. Not at this address." Friday morning, the bank called to confirm that Justin had tried to use the joint card again. I told them to decline it. They said they would. "Would you like us to block the card entirely, Miss Carroll?" "Yes," I said. "Permanently." That night, they finally knocked. Justin first. He stood in the doorway of my little room, hands in his pockets like he was 10 years old again, trying to avoid trouble for breaking the window with a baseball. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, gestured to the chair by the door. He sat, hunched. "I know you're angry." "I'm not," I said. "Not anymore." He looked surprised. "I was angry. I was hurt. I was erased. But now I'm just finished." He rubbed his palms together, the skin red and dry. "We didn't mean to take advantage. It just happened. We got used to it. The help, the house, you." I nodded slowly. "That's the danger, Justin. Getting used to someone's silence. You start to think it's agreement." He swallowed. "We don't have a place yet. Rachel's sister said we could stay for a week, maybe 2. "You'll figure it out," I said. "You're both smart, capable." He stared at the floor. "What about the kids? They'll miss you." "They'll visit," I said. "If you let them." A pause. "Are you really going to make us leave?" "I'm really going to let you leave," I said gently. "You built a life here on the assumption that I'd keep giving, that I'd never say no. I'm saying it now." He didn't argue. He just nodded. And for the first time in a long time, he looked like someone learning. The eviction notice wasn't dramatic, just an envelope, cream-colored, quiet. Slid under their bedroom door on a Saturday morning while they were still asleep. Inside was a letter from Ms. Travers, my attorney, written in firm but neutral language. It cited property rights, unauthorized occupancy, and clearly stated that they had 72 hours to vacate the premises or face formal legal proceedings. It was official. I didn't want to scare them. I just wanted it done, not talked about, not spun into another guilt-ridden negotiation, not dragged out over another season of whispered apologies and half-packed boxes. I needed finality. At 9:14 a.m., the shouting began. Rachel was first. She burst into the hallway holding the letter like it had personally insulted her. Her mascara was smudged. Either she'd been crying or forgot to remove last night's makeup. "You had this delivered? Who the hell do you think you are?" I didn't answer. I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a crossword puzzle. She slammed the letter down on the counter. "Are you serious, June? We said we were leaving. We've been packing. You couldn't even talk to us like a person?" I looked up slowly. "No," I said. "I couldn't. I've talked. I've begged. I've asked. You only hear me when it's typed and notarized." Justin followed her into the kitchen a moment later, holding his phone. "This isn't okay," he said. "You blindsided us." I sipped my tea. "You've had 6 days. I told you. I told you on Sunday. This letter just makes it real." He opened his mouth, closed it, then ran his hand through his hair. "You don't have to do this, Mom." "I do," I said. "For myself." Rachel was pacing now. "Do you know how humiliating this is? Telling the kids they have to leave their house? What are we supposed to tell our friends? That your mother kicked you out?" "No," I said, folding my crossword. "Tell them the truth. That you moved into a house you didn't own, treated the owner like staff, ignored every boundary, and were gently asked to return to your own life." Justin leaned against the counter, his eyes tired. "I didn't think it would get this far." I looked at him. "That's the problem. You never thought it would get this far because you assumed I never would." They left me alone after that, for 2 hours. Then the real work began. Boxes in the hallway, suitcases in the living room, the buzz of a tape gun echoing from the upstairs bedrooms, the refrigerator door opening and closing, shelves slowly emptying. I stayed in my room. Let them have the space. Let them feel the weight of it. That night, I heard the kids crying. It stung, not because I doubted my decision, but because they didn't deserve the fallout. Children never do. I wrote each of them a note. Nora's in careful cursive, Mason's in block letters. I told them I loved them, that they were always welcome to visit, and that this wasn't about them. That I hoped one day they'd understand what it means to reclaim your place in the world. I slipped the notes into their backpacks after they went to bed. On Sunday, I cooked a pot of stew. I didn't offer it to them, but I left it warming on the stove with a stack of bowls and a ladle. Around 6, I heard them eating quietly. No words. No thanks. But I didn't need either. The act wasn't about reconciliation. It was about dignity. Monday morning, a moving truck pulled into the driveway. They didn't say goodbye. Not properly. Rachel brushed past me, red-eyed and silent, carrying a box labeled office. Justin lingered for a moment, holding his car keys. He looked older than I remembered. "I'll call," he said. I nodded. "You know where to find me," I replied. And just like that, the door closed. Not with a slam. Just a quiet click. I stood in the front room alone, surrounded by echo and dust and the soft hum of the now empty house. my house. The quiet after they left wasn't peace, not right away. It was absence. Heavy, like a coat still soaked from rain, the kind you forget you're wearing until you sit down and feel the cold cling to your back. The kitchen looked cleaner, sparsely stocked. My teapot was back where it belonged, and the espresso machine, the air fryer, the clutter of Rachel's curated appliances were gone. The counters were bare again, the way George and I had liked them, but there were echoes everywhere. Tiny fingerprints on the glass door, stickers on the bottom of the hallway mirror, a single sock, bright pink, size toddler, tucked behind the radiator, and silence. No cartoons, no blender, no sighs of impatience behind me as I cut vegetables too slowly. I walked from room to room, not to inspect, but to reacquaint. The den, once my reading room, was empty now. The ring lights, the photography gear, the studio vibe, all gone. It looked awkwardly bare, like a person who's just removed a wig. My garden bench, I discovered, had been stashed in the shed behind a pile of cracked plastic bins. I pulled it out, cleaned it off, set it back under the sycamore tree where it had stood for 20 years. The earth underneath still bore the soft, stubborn dent of its weight. I found the wind chime, too. George's wind chime, the one they'd taken down for hitting the window. It was in a cardboard box marked MISC. I hung it back outside the sunroom window. The first time it chimed, a thin breeze blowing through at dusk, I sat still and listened for nearly 5 minutes. I wasn't lonely. Not exactly. I'd lived with people, noise, obligations, for so long that solitude felt like a language I used to speak fluently and now had to relearn. But I wasn't afraid of the learning. The hardest part came 2 days after they left. I opened the pantry to make my usual grocery list and saw the shelf where Nora's snacks had been. All those rice crackers, fruit rolls, and baby pouches. Empty now. I stood there with the list half written and let the grief come. Not for the snacks. Not for them. For what I had allowed. For the years I had spent hoping to be loved in return for usefulness. For the shame of letting silence stand in for strength. I cried, but not long. Then I made myself a proper breakfast. 2 eggs, toast, tomato slices with salt, and ate it at the big table in the center of the house, like I belonged there. Because I did. That week, I changed the curtains. Took down the prints Rachel had framed, the moody, pale, impersonal kind that could have belonged in a hotel lobby, and hung up my own photos again. George and I on our anniversary in Santa Fe. A picture of Shelley and Tessa on the porch. A faded photo of me holding Justin when he was 3. I didn't take it down. Not out of sentiment, but because it was real. The truth of him wasn't erased by the disappointment of who he became. And still, he was my son. Tessa came by on Thursday. She brought muffins from the bakery and sat with me on the porch. We didn't talk much. She didn't ask questions. She just sat, like she'd always understood silence could be comfort, not absence. I heard, she finally said, about the move. I nodded. You okay? I'm breathing again, I said. She smiled. Good, because I'm proud of you. I looked at her, the only one who'd ever called me just to ask if I needed anything. The one who once texted me a photo of a birdhouse I'd made for her when she was 5 and said, "Still standin', just like you." I'm proud of me too, I said. That night, I opened the window in my room and let the late summer air drift in. The wind chime swayed and rang softly. I lay in bed, not bracing for voices or footsteps or doors slamming, just breathing, fully. in my space, my home, my name on the deed. It didn't end with revenge. It ended with quiet. There were no lawsuits, no dramatic phone calls, no late-night apologies or teary doorstep returns, just the slow settling of dust after a storm, the way life resumes its rhythm when no one's watching. A week after they left, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but the handwriting was Justin's. Still crooked, still rushed. Inside, just a folded sheet of lined paper. "We're staying at Rachel's sister's for now. The kids ask about you." Nora drew a picture of the house and said she missed Grandma's quiet hugs. I don't know what to say to her, except that we're figuring things out. I guess I just wanted to say, I get it now. You weren't being cruel. You were just done being erased. I wish I'd noticed sooner. Love, Justin. I read it twice. Then I put it in the back of the drawer with the property documents. Not because I needed to revisit it, but because it had its place. Like everything else now. That same afternoon, I walked through the backyard, checked the rose bushes, and stood for a long while by the lilac bed, or what used to be one, trampled, overgrown, forgotten. I bought new bulbs the next day. It was late in the season, but I planted anyway. Hands deep in the dirt, knees creaking. The ground was dry in places, soft in others. Like people, I thought. Some areas give more easily than others. As I pressed the bulbs into the soil, I didn't think about what had been taken. I thought about what was growing, what had survived, what would come back season after season, if tended to with care. That weekend, I opened the windows and let the house breathe. Real air. No essential oils, no staged scent diffusers. Just the truth of sun and wind and wood that had held 37 years of life. I stripped the beds, washed every sheet, scrubbed the bathroom floors, polished the banister. Not out of duty, out of devotion. This house had held me when I was a new mother, a widow, a woman pretending to be smaller so others could feel bigger. Now it would hold only what I chose to give it. On Sunday, I made a pot roast, the way George liked it. Carrots soft, not mushy. Potatoes seasoned, not drowned. I ate at the head of the table, alone, but not lonely. For dessert, I sliced the last piece of that lemon cake I'd made on my birthday, the one they'd ignored. I'd frozen it, not knowing why. Maybe this was why. Maybe I needed one final bite to mark the shift. It was still sweet, still dense, still mine. I thought of Rachel. How she'd stood in my kitchen, daring to act like ownership was measured in Instagram aesthetics and voice-activated appliances. I didn't hate her. I pitied her for thinking that love came from what you took, not what you built. I thought of Justin, too. My son. My boy who used to climb trees and scrape his knees and bring me rocks he called treasure. Somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a person. Maybe he saw me only as a threshold, something to pass through, a convenience. But people don't stay thresholds. Eventually, they close. And sometimes, they lock. Would I see them again? Maybe. The children, certainly. I'd welcome them with open arms, open heart. They hadn't chosen any of this. They were still soft clay, unformed. They deserved truth and gentleness. As for Justin and Rachel, time would tell. But my door would only open if respect walked in first. That night, I stood in the doorway of the sunroom, wrapped in George's old cardigan, and watched the wind move through the trees. The house was still, but not empty. It was full of air, of memory, of possibility, and of me, wholly me. No more shrinking to fit inside someone else's version of love. No more earning my right to exist in the place I built. I thought about the day we poured the foundation. George with cement on his jeans, me with graphite smudges from the kitchen sketches I couldn't stop tweaking. I'd asked him, what if it all falls apart someday? He kissed my forehead and said, then we build again, June. That's what you do when something matters. And so I had. Not with lumber, but with boundaries, with truth, with the courage to say, this is mine, and I am worth the space I take up. So if you ever drive past a modest gray house with blue shutters, a rose bush climbing one side, and a wind chime singing softly near the window, you'll know. The woman inside it isn't angry. She's not bitter. She just remembers. And she's home.